Okay, so we're diving into Haruki Murakami's Norwegian Wood. And wow, you've given us chapter summaries, flashcards, even FAQs. This is,
Quite the reading list.
yeah, it's like you want to,
It seems like you want to climb into the book.
yes,
Exactly.
instead of just reading.
Okay, so are you ready to unpack all the themes and characters and the context that make this novel so captivating?
Well, it seems like you're interested in more than just the plot, which is great because Norwegian Wood has a ton of symbolism, a lot of layered meaning. So I think this deep dive is going to be really enriching for you.
I love that. Enriching.
Yeah,
So we obviously have to start at the beginning.
of course.
We meet Toru, he's our protagonist, on an airplane, which isn't the most unconventional opening, right? But then that song,
Right.
Norwegian Wood, and he's just hit with all these memories.
Backed by memories.
Yeah, and it's interesting because right away, Murakami, he's so subtly bringing in these two major elements, which
That's
are
the music.
Yeah.
Exactly. Think of them as threads that run through the entire story.
Okay.
So, for instance, later in the novel, when Toru hears Norwegian Wood, again, it's not just a song on the radio. It immediately takes him back to a specific moment that he shared with Naoko. And these sensory details, they're not just flourishes, they're really key to understanding how Toru experiences the world, especially his relationships.
It's like those details are almost like keys to unlock his inner world.
Exactly.
And speaking of context, I mean, this story takes place in late 1960s Japan, which is a time of student protests, huge cultural shifts. Like, you can't ignore that.
No, absolutely. Murakami's very deliberately setting the story against this backdrop of social upheaval. This is a generation that's really grappling with tradition versus modernity. And those tensions, they're reflected in the characters' own struggles for identity and meaning.
It's like they're caught in this whirlwind of change, both within themselves and like in the world around them.
Exactly.
And it's interesting because we know that love is obviously a big part of Norwegian Wood.
Yeah. I mean,
It's Murakami.
It's Murakami, right? But as we kind of dig deeper,
There's so much more
there are these other huge themes
Oh, for sure.
just waiting to be explored.
Yeah.
Like what?
Loss, for one. The suicide of Kazuki, Toru's friend, casts a long shadow on everyone, especially Toru and Naoko. And then there's mental health Naoko struggles, the sanatorium setting, all point to Murakami's exploration of the human psyche, the light and the shadows.
Right, and that's what makes it so compelling.
Exactly.
It's not light reading material.
It's not.
But it makes you think.
It makes you think.
Okay, so let's talk about the characters.
Yes, Liz.
Specifically, Naoko. The summary that you provided uses the word fragile.
Right.
And then in chapter 3, we discover that she struggled with depression even before the start of this story.
Right. That detail is crucial because it reveals that Naoko's fragility isn't just a consequence of Kazuki's death. It's a part of her, something she carried long before. This makes her relationship with Toru all the more complicated.
Right, because their bond is already deeply rooted in this shared grief over Kazuki.
Deeply.
But it's almost like too intense, too much.
Too steeped in sorrow.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're drowning in it together.
And then enter Midori
Yes.
in chapter 5. And she is just like a breath of fresh air.
A complete breath of fresh air.
She's bold, she's outspoken, she's full of life.
The opposite of Naoko.
Yes.
Yeah, and Midori's presence is fascinating. She disrupts the melancholy atmosphere surrounding Toru, almost challenging him to embrace life's vibrancy. It's as if she represents a different path, one less defined by the weight of the past.
It's like she's a different path, yes.
Exactly.
Now, another character that I thought was interesting, especially as I was reading through these chapter outlines, is Reiko.
Reiko, yeah.
She feels like such a guiding figure, like somebody with wisdom.
Definitely. In chapter 4, we see Reiko's own history with mental health, and this allows her to offer a unique perspective on Naoko's condition. She becomes a source of support and understanding for both Naoko and Toru.
It's like she almost provides a bridge between the raw intensity of Toru and Naoko's relationship.
Yes.
And a more grounded understanding of life and its complexities.
She embodies the healing power of human connection, how even in the midst of personal struggles, people can find solace and support in one another.
So I love that.
Yeah.
Because it's so real, it's so human.
It's very human.
Let's talk about Murakami's writing for a second.
Okay.
He's famous for magical realism, but I feel like he also has this masterful use of setting and symbolism.
He does.
One that really stood out to me was how he uses the countryside in Chapter 3.
Yes. It's never just about pretty scenery with Murakami, is it? The countryside becomes this deliberate contrast, highlighting the stark difference between the external peace of nature and the character's inner turmoil.
Like their internal landscape is mirrored
By the external.
or even amplified
Amplified,
by
exactly.
the external world.
Yeah.
And then there's that song, Norwegian Wood.
Right.
Again, it's not just a catchy title. It's a recurring motif. It's a symbol.
Infused with meaning.
Yes.
That's Murakami at his finest. He takes this popular song and infuses it with deeper meaning. It becomes a symbol of yearning, of nostalgia for something beautiful but unattainable. The feeling it evokes connects directly to memory, loss, and the fleeting nature of happiness itself.
And speaking of recurring themes, it feels like loneliness itself is almost a character in this story.
Almost like a character, yeah.
Because even when Toru is surrounded by people,
Right.
he always seems to be in this like bubble of isolation.
That's an insightful observation. Murakami masterfully captures that universal feeling of existential loneliness. Think about it. You can be surrounded by people, yet still feel utterly alone.
It's that feeling of being unseen, unheard, even when you're surrounded by noise and chatter. And it's something so many readers connect with on a personal level.
It's very relatable.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because, the reviews that you shared mentioned this.
Right.
People are still captivated by this story.
Decades later.
Decades later, what do you think keeps readers coming back?
Well, I think Murakami has this incredible ability to tap into those timeless, universal experiences,
Yeah.
Love, loss, the search for meaning. These are themes that resonate across generations,
It's true.
regardless of, when or where you were raised.
It's like he holds up a mirror
Right.
to those parts of ourselves.
To our vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Those secret parts of ourselves that we don't always acknowledge.
And in doing so,
Yes.
it's interesting because it creates this sense of shared humanity.
It does.
Where it's like,
shared humanity. Yeah, you're not alone in your struggles, right?
but it's also kind of unsettling, wouldn't you say?
It's both comforting and unsettling.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh,
Because you have to confront it.
other people understand these dark emotions, but now I have to actually confront them head on.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that elevates Norwegian Wood beyond just a love story, right?
Yep.
It's about the human condition itself, the way we make sense of life's big questions.
Exactly.
It's about those moments when we're forced to confront the fragility of life, the inevitability of death. And one reviewer beautifully articulated this, saying that the book is about accepting that death is not the opposite of life, but a part of it.
Wow, that's really powerful.
It is.
And it makes me think about how those characters, Toru, Naoko, Midori, like they each embody different aspects.
I do.
Yeah.
Think about Toru. He's haunted by Kazuki's death throughout the novel. It influences his perceptions, his relationships. Everything is seen through the lens of that loss.
Like he's trying to figure out a way to reconcile these memories
Right.
of Kazuki with his present reality.
With his present.
And then you have Naoko who's struggling with not only Kazuki's death, but
Her own internal darkness.
her own internal darkness.
Right. It's almost as if she's caught in between,
Yes.
unable to fully inhabit either the world of the living or the world of the dead.
That's true.
She's a poignant example of how grief can manifest in unpredictable ways.
And that's what makes Midori's character, even more fascinating in a way.
Right.
Because she represents this different way
Totally.
of relating to death.
Right.
It's not this ending. It's like this reminder to embrace the present.
Midori is such a force of nature. She doesn't shy away from difficult emotions,
Wow.
but she also refuses to let them define her.
Right. She's not afraid.
She chooses to live fully, even in the face of potential loss.
Yes.
Remember her father's illness.
It's like she understands that life and death are intertwined,
Yes.
and that by embracing one, you're acknowledging the presence of the other.
And her presence challenges Toru to confront his own relationship with grief,
Yes.
prompting him to consider a life beyond his sorrow. He's drawn to both women, Nyoko's intensity, Midori's vibrancy, but their approaches to life and death are fundamentally different.
And he's caught between those two.
He's at a crossroads.
Trying to figure out his own path through grief towards a more meaningful future. So what can you tell us about where Toru's journey ultimately leads him without,
Right.
giving too much away?
Without giving too much away, Toru's journey is less about finding definitive answers and more about learning to navigate life's ambiguities. He discovers that sometimes there are no right or wrong choices, only different paths leading through both darkness and light.
Which is, very true to life, right?
It is.
Like there aren't always these easy answers.
Rarely.
It's just different ways of like experiencing the world, processing our own individual journeys.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that makes Norwegian Wood such a powerful, enduring novel. It reflects the complexities of human experience without offering simplistic solutions.
It acknowledges the messiness, the uncertainty, and ultimately the potential for growth and healing that exists within those messy, uncertain spaces.
Hmm.
And that actually, speaking of uncertainty, that kind of reminded me of the lingering question from these reviews that you sent.
Oh,
That really stuck with me, the idea that death isn't the opposite of life, but a part of it.
right.
It feels especially relevant when we think about Toru and Naoko and Midori. That question really stuck with me, death being a part of life, not the opposite. It feels especially relevant when we think about Toru and Naoko and Midori.
It's the core of the novel, I think, and each character embodies a different facet of that complex relationship with life and death.
So how do you see that idea playing out in their relationships with each other?
Well, Naoko seems almost imprisoned by death, you know? She can't fully embrace life, can't move forward because she's tethered to the loss of Kazuki. It makes her connection with Toro both intense and tragically fragile.
Two people bound by grief. But is that enough to build a future on?
Exactly. It's a poignant but ultimately unsustainable foundation. And then we have Midori, a stark contrast. She acknowledges death, even confronts it with her father's illness, yet she doesn't allow it to define her.
Midori feels like a burst of sunlight, a reminder that joy and sorrow can exist together.
She understands that embracing life means accepting death as a natural part of the cycle. Remember when she tells Toro, death is not the opposite of life, but a part of it. It's as if she's giving him and us as readers a new lens through which to view loss.
And she does it with such a fierce love for life, which is incredibly powerful. It's no wonder Toru is drawn to both women. Naoko's intensity is alluring, but Midori represents a different path altogether.
He's caught between these two poles, trying to figure out his own relationship, not just with them, but with life, death, and his own capacity for healing.
So what can you tell us about where Toru's journey ultimately leads him? Without giving too much away, of course.
Murakami doesn't tie everything up with a neat bow, and I think that's one of the things that makes Norwegian Wood so powerful. Toru's journey isn't about finding easy answers, but about learning to navigate the gray areas of life and loss. He has to decide what it means to truly live, to love, and to let go.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most profound journeys are those we take within ourselves. We've explored the evocative world of Norwegian Wood, from its haunting themes to its unforgettable characters. What are some final thoughts you'd leave with our listener as they embark on their own reading experience?
Norwegian Wood is a novel that stays with you long after you finish the last page. It invites multiple readings, endless interpretations. Pay attention to the details, the recurring motifs, the poignant reflections on life and death, and most importantly, allow yourself to feel it all.
Because it's in those moments of vulnerability, those moments when we allow ourselves to truly feel that we connect with the raw beauty of Murakami's masterpiece. This deep dive may be over, but the conversation doesn't have to end here. Pick up the book, get swept away by Murakami's prose, and discover your own interpretation of this unforgettable story.